Okay, this video is about creating a Scatterplot mini tab. There are several different ways to do it, so we're going to practice it. I'm going to use the restaurant dataset. So I'm going to go to mini tab here, open up the restaurant dataset from the sample library. And I'm going to look at the relationship between sales, which are in thousands of dollars, and seats in the restaurant. Okay, so sales and seats. So if I want a scatter plot, a basic scatter plot, I can come up under Graph, Scatter Plot. Okay, so that's the simplest way to do it. And so you can see that we're going to do a simple graph. Okay, so I'm going to say OK. I'm going to put what I want my y variable to be. So this is typically our response variable. So I think sales depend on the number of seats in the restaurant. So I'm going to put sales and seats. Now you can do multiple scatter plots at one time, okay, but right now I'm just going to do one. As for the options here, there's not really a whole lot to do. We can choose most of these after the fact, but I'll run through them quickly. So the scale is about setting up the axes and the tick marks and reference lines. We don't need any of those. The labels are about putting titles and footnotes on, but you know we can do that after the fact. The data view is whether you want symbols or you want some other fancy stuff. Right now, we're not going to do that. Multiple graphs we're not doing because we just want to look at the relationship between two variables. And data options is where we get rid of missing data, but for two quantitative variables, it'll automatically take care of that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And so here you see this scatter plot of seats. And so once again, if I were going to edit this, I would make sure there's a unit. So it's the number of seats in the dining area. Double click over here to get sales in thousands of dollars. Better title. So this is restaurants in Wisconsin in 1979. And the sample is 279, although there aren't 279 dots on there. There is some missing data. So I should talk about that in a little bit. Okay? And that's our basic scatter plot. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this graph to your handout so that you can see it. Okay? So once again, the edits that I did, contextual title, and horizontal axis is contextual with units, and the vertical axis is contextual with units. Okay, so that's our first type of graph. Basic, very simple. Now, if we are looking at this graph and go, gosh, it would be nice to see this best fit line on there to see if there really is a linear pattern, we can do that either when we're creating the graph, and so I'm going to show you that quickly. So under Stat, Scatter Plot, you could do it with what's called the regression line, and if you do that, it'll automatically put the line in there. However, if you forget and you did a simple one to start with, you can come up here and you can do a right mouse click and you can add a regression fit. And it'll ask you what kind, and we want linear. And if you say OK, it'll put the line on there for you. Okay? So if you want the regression line on the scatter plot, that's the way to do it. And so once again, let me send this graph to Word. and make some notes on this as well. So to add a regression line, right mouse click on the graph, choose add regression fit linear. Okay. So both good scatter plots, good labels. Okay. Another possible type of scatter plot is what we call a marginal plot. So let me put this on the next page here. Okay. So in Minitab, if we were trying to do a marginal plot, we'd come up under Graph, go to Marginal Plot, do it with box plots, because the reason we're going to use a marginal plot is to explore the impact of outliers. And so since a box plot automatically shows us the outliers, that's the best choice to make. So we'll say OK. Now notice you can only do one graph at a time. So I could do sales with my X variable being seats. The marginal options just say, do you want a box plot histogram or something? We're going to just leave that alone. The scale does the same thing about ticks and reference lines. The labels does the same thing about titles and footnotes. And the data options is the same thing about excluding data. Okay? So after that, you just say OK. Once again, you edit your titles here, right? So number of seats in the dining area. Sales in thousands of dollars. And Wisconsin restaurants in 1979. Okay. Now you can see the box plots, and you can see we have lots of outliers from this point on in terms of seats, and all of these are outliers in terms of sales. Okay. So this is a good graph. Now the one disadvantage about this graph, and I'm going to send it to Word here, is that you cannot put the regression line on it. Okay. I'm going to put this down below the dialog box here for you. So that's a different type of graph. All right, and one last type of graph. So we're going to look at a scatter plot that has the line on it, but not only the line, because once again we could see that we could get to the line from just using Scatterplot, but the equation of the line. And so that's the fitted line plot. Okay, so in Minitab, you go to, in Minitab, you go to Stat, so it's not under Graph. Stat, Regression, Fitted Line Plot. You once again specify the response and the predictor variable. So if I put in my sales and my seats and specify the linear, you can see that you've got a few different things. We're not going to worry about graphs like that, not worried about options or storage, so all you really have to do is say OK. And you get the line, you get the graph, so you see it's the exact same scatter plot. You would change the same things, right? So number of seats in the dining area, and sales in thousands of dollars, and you get the regression line. You could change the title, of course, again. So this is Wisconsin restaurants in 1979. There is the equation of the line. This information, I typically, if I'm thinking about a presentation graph, would delete. So I highlight it and hit the delete key. And there we have a fitted line plot. So let me send that to Word for us so that we have it in our handout. Let's see if it went in the right spot. It did. No, it didn't. So let me put it in the right spot. And there you have all the different ways in Minitab to create a scatter plot.